Everything stopped the moment it happened. 1 second, the street outside the building was full of noise, traffic passing, people chatting, doors opening and closing. The next, silence spread like a shadow. Inside, Steven Seagal stood near the entrance, holding a slim black folder in his hand. He had just stepped forward when a man suddenly moved toward him. Fast. Too fast. Before anyone could understand what was going on, the man lifted something from beneath his jacket. An AK-style rifle. People froze. A woman near the counter dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a sharp sound that felt louder than anything else in the room. A man whispered, "Is this real?" under his breath. Someone else took a step back, bumping into a chair. Phones began to rise. Almost without thinking, people started recording. The man's hands were steady. His eyes were locked on Steven. "Don't move," he said quietly. No shouting. No screaming. Just a calm, dangerous tone. Steven looked at the weapon. Then he looked at the man. And then, he did nothing. No panic. No raised hands. No sudden movement. He didn't even step back. He simply stood there, calm and composed, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. That reaction confused everyone. Some expected him to shout. Others thought he would try to run. A few people thought he might argue. But he didn't. He just remained still. Silent. Watching. It was unsettling. Why wasn't he afraid? Did he know something no one else did? Was he trying to stay brave? Or was there something about this situation that nobody else could see yet? A security guard near the door hesitated, unsure whether to act. The staff behind the counter stopped moving completely. Even the people recording seemed unsure whether to keep filming or put their phones down. Time felt strange, like it was slowing down. Every second stretched longer than the last. The man tightened his grip on the weapon. The room held its breath. And still, Steven didn't react. Not even slightly. That was the moment everyone realized. This story was not going to end the way they expected. Because what happened next changed everything. And if you think you know how this situation ends, wait till you see what happens at the end. The building itself was nothing special. From the outside, it looked like any ordinary public office in the city, gray walls, large glass windows, and a quiet entrance that most people walked through without thinking twice. Inside, however, the atmosphere had changed completely. Just minutes earlier, it had been calm. People had been standing in loose queues. Some were checking their phones. Others were quietly talking to staff behind the counter. A printer hummed softly in the background. Papers slid across desks. A digital display blinked with waiting numbers. Everything felt normal. Too normal. Now every sound seemed louder. The low buzz of the lights overhead. The soft whirring of a computer fan. The distant noise of traffic outside. Even someone breathing nearby felt noticeable. Steven stood near the entrance, slightly to the side of the main queue. His black folder rested against his chest, held loosely but securely. He wasn't blocking anyone. He wasn't demanding attention. He looked like any other customer who had simply come in to complete some paperwork and leave. His clothes were simple and neat. A dark jacket. Plain shirt. Comfortable shoes. Nothing flashy. Nothing that drew attention. Yet somehow all attention was now on him. A few meters away, the man holding the rifle remained still. His stance was firm, feet planted slightly apart. One shoulder leaned subtly forward, as if he had practiced standing that way before. The weapon was angled downward, not pointed directly at anyone's head, but close enough to send a clear message. He was serious. Behind the main counter, two staff members sat frozen. One had a pen in her hand, half raised, as if she had been writing something when everything stopped. The other stared at the screen in front of him without blinking. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Near the waiting area, an elderly man slowly lowered himself back into his chair, afraid that standing might attract attention. A young couple stood close together, their hands tightly linked, whispering softly to each other. "Is this real?" the woman murmured. "I think so," the man replied quietly. A security guard stood near the wall, his radio clipped to his belt. His fingers hovered close to it, but he hadn't touched it yet. His eyes kept moving, from the man with the weapon to Steven to the exits, then back again. He was calculating, looking for the safest option. But nothing felt safe. Outside, people continued walking past the windows, unaware of what was happening inside. Cars stopped at traffic lights. Buses passed by. Life carried on as usual. Inside, time felt frozen. Steven shifted his weight slightly from one foot to the other. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but in the silence, it felt enormous. The man's eyes followed it instantly. Steven noticed. He slowly adjusted his grip on the folder, making sure it was clearly visible and nowhere near his pockets. Every movement he made was careful, thoughtful, controlled. It wasn't fear. It was awareness. He understood the danger. But he also understood something else. Panic would only make things worse. A woman near the window wiped her palms against her coat without realizing she was doing it. Someone at the back quietly closed their bag, the zipper sounding far too loud. Click. Several heads turned. Then relaxed. No reaction. For now. The air felt heavy. Like a storm building that hadn't yet broken. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for a shout. Waiting for a mistake. Waiting for someone to lose control. But instead, there was only silence. And in that silence, something strange began to form. A sense that this situation wasn't random. That there was more to it. That the man with the weapon hadn't come here by accident. And that Steven's calm wasn't accidental either. Whatever was about to happen, it had already started. No one spoke. Not a single person in the room dared to raise their voice. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Thick. Like something pressing down on everyone's chest. The man with the rifle adjusted his stance slightly. His right foot moved back half a step. The weapon tilted a little higher. Not enough to aim directly, but enough to remind everyone who was in control. A quiet warning. Steven noticed it instantly. His eyes followed the movement. Not in a dramatic way. Not with fear. Just awareness. He had seen the change. And he respected it. Slowly, Steven took a shallow breath and let it out through his nose. His shoulders relaxed just a fraction, as if he were telling his own body to stay calm. To stay steady. Across the room, someone whispered, "What does he want?" No answer came. Another voice replied softly, "Maybe money, maybe? I don't know." Their words faded quickly, swallowed by the silence. Phones remained raised. Hands trembled slightly. A few people tried to steady their grip by holding their phones with both hands. Others lowered them for a moment, afraid of attracting attention, then slowly raised them again. No one wanted to miss what might happen next. At the counter, one of the staff members finally moved. Just a little. He shifted in his chair. The sound of fabric against plastic echoed louder than it should have. The man's head snapped in that direction. Instantly, the staff member froze. Completely. His eyes widened. He slowly raised both hands to show he wasn't doing anything. After a few seconds, the man looked away again. Relief spread quietly through the room. But it didn't last long. The security guard took one cautious step to the side. Barely noticeable. He was trying to position himself closer to the wall, where he could reach the emergency button if needed. Steven saw this too. Without turning his head, he slightly lifted one finger against the folder. A subtle signal. Almost invisible. It was as if he were saying, "Not yet." The guard hesitated. Then stopped. Confused but trusting his instinct. Why did he listen? He wasn't sure. He just felt that moving now might make things worse. The man holding the rifle exhaled slowly. His breath was uneven. Not panicked, but tense. Like someone trying hard to stay in control. His eyes flicked from face to face. Counting. Measuring. Judging. Who was calm? Who was scared? Who might be a threat? When his gaze reached Steven again, it paused. Lingering longer than before. Steven met his eyes. Not in challenge. Not in defiance. Just steady. Neutral. Human. For a moment something changed. The man's grip tightened, then loosened. His jaw clenched, then relaxed. It was subtle. Most people missed it, but those watching closely saw it. Doubt. Uncertainty. Conflict. Something inside him was struggling. A young boy, sitting beside his mother, tugged gently on her sleeve. "Mum, can we go?" he whispered. She shook her head softly. "No, love. Stay still." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were filled with fear. Time dragged on. Seconds felt like minutes. Minutes felt endless. No one knew how long they had been standing there. 5 minutes? 10? More? It didn't matter. It felt like forever. Then, unexpectedly, the man spoke again. His voice was quieter than before. Less sharp. Less commanding. Almost tired. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said. The words hung in the air. Nobody responded. Nobody moved. But everyone felt it. Something had shifted. The story was changing direction. And nobody expected what would happen next. The moment the man spoke, something changed in the room. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." His voice was low. Not angry. Not threatening. Almost uncertain. For a second, no one knew how to react. People had expected shouting. orders, demands. But this sounded different. The words traveled quietly across the space, settling into every corner. Some people looked at each other, silently asking the same question. Did he really mean that? Phones, which had been shaking slightly in nervous hands, became steadier. A few people adjusted their grip and raised them a little higher. If something important was about to happen, they didn't want to miss it. Near the window, a young man slowly leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes never left the scene. A woman beside him wiped her glasses with her sleeve, then put them back on carefully, as if preparing herself to see something difficult. Behind the counter, one of the staff members swallowed hard. His throat moved visibly. He glanced at his colleague, who gave a tiny nod. They were both still scared. But they were also listening now. The security guard shifted his weight again just slightly. This time nobody noticed. Everyone was focused on the man and Steven, the invisible center of the room. Steven remained where he was. Still, balanced, calm. He didn't step forward. He didn't step back. He simply stood in a way that made him seem present without being threatening. His eyes stayed on the man's face, not on the weapon. That choice mattered. Some people noticed it. They whispered softly to each other. He's not even looking at the gun. How is he so calm? It's like he trusts him. More phones were raised. A woman near the entrance slowly lifted hers from chest level to eye level, pressing record. Her hands had stopped shaking now. Curiosity had begun to replace fear. At the back of the room, a man who had been hiding partly behind a pillar leaned out slightly, wanting a better view. He held his breath without realizing it. Nobody wanted to blink. Nobody wanted to miss the next moment. The man with the rifle shifted again. This time he lowered the weapon just a little. Not enough to be harmless, but enough to show hesitation. A few people noticed. A ripple of quiet reaction passed through the crowd. Small gasps, raised eyebrows, quick glances. Did you see that? He lowered it. Maybe he's calming down? Steven saw it too. Slowly, carefully, he nodded once. A tiny movement. A sign of acknowledgement. Not approval. Not celebration. Just recognition. I hear you, it seemed to say. The man's eyes softened briefly, then hardened again, like someone fighting against his own thoughts. I just need someone to listen, the man said. His voice cracked slightly at the end. It was the first sign of real emotion. Not anger. Not power. Pain. A woman near the counter covered her mouth with her hand. Another person whispered, "He's scared?" That word spread silently. Scared. Not dangerous. Not evil. Scared. The crowd began to see him differently. Not as a monster, but as a troubled person standing at the edge of something he didn't fully understand. Steven took a slow step forward. Just one. Careful. Measured. The security guard tensed. Several people sucked in their breath. But the man didn't react. He didn't raise the weapon. He didn't shout. He just watched. Steven stopped after that single step. He kept a safe distance. Still respectful. Still calm. I'm listening, Steven said quietly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't echo. But somehow everyone heard it. Clear. Steady. Honest. Those two words changed everything. The crowd felt it. A shift. Like the air itself had softened. More phones zoomed in. Some people stopped recording and just watched with their own eyes. This wasn't about drama anymore. This was about something real. About understanding. About what happens when fear meets patience. And every single person in that room knew. They were witnessing something rare. Something unexpected. Something that could only end one of two ways. And no one knew which one it would be. Not yet. The room had been holding its breath for what felt like an eternity. Every small sound, every subtle movement, was amplified in the silence. A pen dropped somewhere near the counter, and the sharp click made heads turn instantly. The young couple at the back gripped each other's hands a little tighter. Even the security guard's knuckles whitened around the wall-mounted radio. Then Steven made another small movement. He gently shifted the folder in his hand, turning it so that the man could see the papers inside. The documents were neatly organized, official-looking, and unmistakably legitimate. No sudden gestures. No dramatic flair. Just the quiet display of truth. For a moment, the man's eyes lingered on the folder. The tension in his shoulders started to ease, almost imperceptibly. He blinked slowly. His jaw loosened. A few seconds later, his grip on the weapon shifted. It wasn't as tight. Not a full release, but enough to show hesitation. Steven didn't move closer. He didn't try to intimidate. He simply stayed calm, composed, and clearly unafraid. "Wait," he said softly, in a tone that carried more weight than volume. The man's gaze snapped to him. "Wait," he repeated, uncertain. "Yes," Steven said. "Look at it. Check it properly. You'll see it's valid." He nodded slightly toward the folder again, motioning toward the documents without pointing or demanding. The man lowered the weapon a fraction more and, with visible reluctance, took the folder in his free hand. He flipped through the papers slowly, each turn deliberate, as though fearing a trap. Every person in the room watched. Phones zoomed in, hands shook slightly, but nobody spoke. The whispering had completely stopped. Time seemed to stretch. 1 second felt like 10. 10 seconds felt like minutes. Then the man's eyes widened. He looked up from the papers. His expression shifted from suspicion to shock. Recognition. Then relief. This is all valid," he muttered. Steven didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded once, small, calm, acknowledging the truth had been seen. The man slowly stepped back. The weapon lowered completely, now resting harmlessly at his side. A quiet exhale swept through the room. People released the tension they hadn't realized they were holding. The young boy at the back exhaled softly. His mother hugged him gently. The staff at the counter straightened in their chairs, blinking as if awakening from a long, anxious dream. The security guard finally relaxed. His fingers unclenched from the radio. He glanced at Steven, then at the man, and nodded ever so slightly. There was no triumph in the gesture, just recognition of control restored. The man with the weapon didn't run. He didn't shout. He just looked at Steven for a long moment. A nod passed between them, quiet, respectful, unspoken. Then he turned toward the exit, slowly, deliberately, and left without incident. The door clicked shut behind him. The room exhaled collectively. Phones went down, hands unclenched, whispers began again, this time softer, thoughtful, relieved. Steven adjusted the folder in his hands and took a slow step forward toward the counter. The staff members looked at him with awe, but he didn't acknowledge them beyond a subtle nod. Calm, steady, controlled, the presence alone carried authority. People began to move again, slowly. Conversations restarted in muted tones. Some walked toward the exit. Others stayed in place, staring at Steven, trying to process what they had witnessed. It wasn't just that the danger had passed. It was how it had passed. Without yelling. Without fighting. Without chaos. A lesson unfolded quietly in the air. Calm observation, patience, and measured action could resolve a situation that fear and aggression could never handle. No one in the room would forget this moment. A man had come in with a weapon. Everyone had expected drama, shouting, or worse. Instead, they had witnessed something entirely different. Something rare. Calm strength. Silent authority. Respect earned without a single loud word or threatening gesture. And for everyone watching, everyone recording, the takeaway was clear. Chaos doesn't need to win. Fear doesn't need to control. Patience, awareness, and presence of mind can change everything. As Steven tucked the folder under his arm and turned toward the exit himself, a few people whispered, That was amazing." A quiet murmur passed through the room, awe, relief, and respect intertwined. No applause. No celebration. Just a shared understanding that what had just happened was extraordinary. And yet, for Steven, it had been simple. Just calm, steady action. The tension in that room had ended, yet the lesson it left behind lingered far longer than the minutes of fear and uncertainty. Everyone in the bank had seen it. A man come in with aggression, with a weapon, expecting control through intimidation. And they had watched as Steven Seagal, calm, composed, and fully aware, had changed everything without shouting, fighting, or escalating the situation. It was a quiet kind of power. A power not measured by force or loudness, but by patience, awareness, and restraint. And that is something most of us rarely stop to think about in our own lives. Think about it. How often do we face situations where stress, fear, or conflict rises around us? At work, at home, in school, or even in everyday moments with strangers. How often do we feel pressure to react immediately, to shout back, argue, or try to dominate a situation? Most of us do. Almost reflexively. Yet, what we saw in that bank was different. Steven didn't react impulsively. He observed. He assessed. He stayed calm while everything else in the room was in chaos. He acknowledged the truth quietly and let it do the work. And because of that, the situation de-escalated naturally. The lesson here isn't about guns or banks or even Steven Seagal. It's about us, our reactions, our choices, and our ability to stay composed when pressure mounts. Calmness is contagious. When one person remains steady, the tension around them can shift. Fear becomes less overwhelming. Decisions become clearer. Actions become more measured. It doesn't require heroics or showmanship. It doesn't require physical strength or dramatic gestures. Just awareness. Just presence. Just patience. Think about your own life for a moment. A heated conversation with a coworker. A stressful meeting with a teacher or boss. An argument with a friend or family member. Moments when anger or panic threatens to take over. What if, like Steven, you could take a small step back? Observe the situation fully. Listen. Understand. Act calmly. It doesn't mean ignoring problems. It doesn't mean weakness. It means choosing the response that actually works, rather than the one that feels immediate or satisfying in the moment. It also shows that respect is earned through restraint, not force. The man with the weapon left because he realized he didn't need to escalate. He realized the truth, and he realized that aggression didn't give him control, clarity did. Similarly, in life we often try to control situations through force or fear, only to find that nothing changes. The real change comes when we remain composed, patient, and aware of what's happening, and when we let truth, calm action, and integrity guide us. Every time we stay calm under pressure, we make the people around us feel safer, more confident, and more capable. Every time we pause instead of reacting, we give ourselves and others the chance to see the truth clearly. It's a lesson that doesn't come from watching chaos unfold on screen. It's a lesson that comes from observing life, understanding human behavior, and practicing quiet strength. Even small moments count. Holding your tongue when tempers flare. Smiling when frustration builds. Listening when someone expects you to argue. Acting with patience when stress rises. Each small act builds a foundation of respect, trust, and control. The same principles that had resolved the tension in that bank without a single shout. The lesson is clear. Strength is quiet, patience is powerful, and calm is transformative. And when you practice this, you don't just change the moment. You change how people perceive you, how situations unfold, and how your own life progresses. Sometimes the loudest victories are the quietest ones. And if we remember that, we can face almost anything with dignity, composure, and control. As the man with the weapon disappeared through the door, the bank slowly returned to life. The subtle hum of electronics, the shuffle of papers, and the distant rumble of traffic outside reminded everyone that the world had continued moving while they had been caught in this extraordinary moment. Yet, for those who had witnessed it, the experience would linger far longer than the sounds of the office or the mundane routines of the day. What had just happened was more than a confrontation. It was a demonstration of the quiet strength that can exist in all of us. For a few moments, the room had been frozen in tension, fear, and uncertainty. People had been scared, unsure, and ready to react in ways that might have escalated the situation. And then, in a way that was simple, calm, and almost understated, the tension dissolved. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It didn't require displays of force or dramatic gestures. And yet, the effect was undeniable. Calm, steady awareness had changed the outcome. Presence and patience had taken the place of panic. Observation had replaced impulse. And understanding had overtaken fear. This is the kind of lesson that resonates far beyond the walls of a bank or the streets of a city. It's a lesson about life. About how we interact with others. About how we handle conflict, fear, and uncertainty in every situation we face. Think about your own life. How many times have you reacted too quickly, spoken without thinking, or allowed fear or frustration to control your actions? Perhaps in a heated conversation with a friend, or a disagreement at work, or even a simple misunderstanding at home. Imagine if, in those moments, you paused, you observed, you stayed calm. You let the situation reveal itself before taking action. What would change? How would people respond differently? How would you feel about your own choices? Moments like this remind us that patience is powerful. Calmness is strength. Presence is authority. And, perhaps most importantly, that our actions, however small or quiet, can influence the people around us in profound ways. A single decision to remain composed can transform fear into understanding, chaos into clarity, and conflict into respect. And this isn't something that only happens in extreme situations like the one we just witnessed. Every day presents opportunities to practice the same principles. Waiting calmly in line when someone is rude. Listening attentively when someone speaks harshly. Choosing a measured response instead of reacting impulsively. Small acts of restraint build trust, respect, and influence. Over time, they define how others perceive us and, more importantly, how we perceive ourselves. So now, I want to ask you something. Reflecting on this story, think about a moment in your own life where you could have chosen calm over chaos, patience over panic, or awareness over impulsivity. What would you have done differently? How could that choice have changed the outcome? And what might happen if you applied this same mindset moving forward? Take a moment to think about it. Really visualize it. Imagine how you would respond. Imagine the confidence, the clarity, and the control you could feel. Imagine the respect you could earn, not through intimidation, shouting, or aggression, but simply by being composed, aware, and patient. Now, I want you to share that thought. Comment below with one word that represents how you would handle a situation like this. Perhaps respect, calm, patience, control, or even observation. Whatever word comes to mind. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. That one word can start a conversation, inspire others, and even remind you of the lesson each time you see it. And don't stop there. If you found this story meaningful, if you felt the tension, the suspense, and the resolution resonate with you, give this video a like. Share it with friends, family, or anyone who might benefit from seeing how calm strength can change a situation. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Stories that not only entertain but also teach lessons that can be applied in everyday life. Remember, life doesn't reward chaos. It doesn't reward loudness. It rewards awareness, patience, and composure. Every moment you choose calm over reaction, understanding over fear, and presence over impulse, you are shaping your own path, influencing those around you, and demonstrating the quiet power that can transform any situation. So ask yourself again, what would you do in a moment like this? How would you act? Would you panic? Would you react immediately? Or would you, like Steven, observe, assess, and choose the calm path? Type your word in the comments. Reflect on it. And let it guide your next encounter with uncertainty, tension, or fear. Because the lesson from today isn't just for a bank or a weapon or a stranger. It's for life, for work, for home, for every moment where your choices matter more than circumstances. This story is a reminder, sometimes the quietest victories are the most powerful. Sometimes the calmest actions leave the deepest impact. And sometimes just one person's patience, awareness, and composure can change the course of an entire room, and perhaps even the course of your own life. So comment, reflect, like, share, subscribe. And remember, calmness is strength, patience is power, and quiet awareness can change everything.